Welcome to our showcase. I'm actually going to stop that music because it was annoying. I'm PJ, and I'm joined by my co-instructor this afternoon, Selma. And we're so glad that you could join us for our 201 awards and showcase. I believe, do we have everyone? I think we do. I think all of our students are here, and it looks like all of our parents are joining as well. We're going to start, first of all, talking a little bit about our class and how wonderful they were this week. And I'm going to turn it over to Selma because she's going to discuss them a little bit.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for making it to our showcase. We're really excited for you all to be able to see everything that we've put together for the last week. As you know, this is also 201 based off of being able to come to 101. So we built on a lot of existing skills and we're really excited for everything that ended up happening. Just so you know, they worked so incredibly hard and their last full debate today went really well. So we're really excited to show you a little shortened version, but we're going to get into that a little bit later.
So now we're going to move on to our awards. And I'm going to crank up the music a little bit for that. This will be a little bit better. Our first award goes to Mackenzie Grove. Congratulations, Mackenzie. Our second award, Siyun Jong. Great job, Siyun. Our next award goes to Alvin Lee. Yay, Alvin. Charlotte Liu. Congratulations. Arian Shaw. Ryan Tay. Congratulations, Ryan. Rose Whaley. Yay, Rose. And Emily Zhang. How about that? That song ended right on time, too. We're asking that our students during this showcase, because they know how to do all this stuff technologically better than the rest of us on the earth, to work on their student surveys so that we know that the students give feedback to Capital Debate. And we also ask the parents share your voice. So after you finish up this week, after you've seen the showcase, I think you're going to be so impressed. We would definitely like to have your feedback. So share your information through those surveys. I will tell you that they read every single survey from every single person. So they read all the student surveys, all the parent surveys, and many times it impacts what we're actually doing in our classes, both online as well as in person. So thanks so much for sharing your voice as far as our programs. Today only, they have a special coupon for classes if you want to take additional classes. So you just took Debate 201. There's actually a 301 and a 401 class after this. Capital Debate is also doing their year-long league, and they're going to be online, I believe, for the first semester for sure. So because they've had so much success with the online classes, they're going to continue to do their club league online as well. So if you don't have a debate team at your school or in your community, you can join the Capital Debate League and actually compete at competitions. I think they do them every 2 to 3 weeks. So basically like once a month, they're going to have different competitions. And then they have a national tournament that's a Capital Debate tournament at the end of the school year. So if you're interested in continuing in debate, this would be a great opportunity. There are also other programs, and Selma and I have taught business communications together. There's legal communications, interpersonal communications, and STEM communications. As we're getting to the end of the summer, some of these courses won't be offered, but they will be offered next year. So think about maybe adding one of those courses to your repertoire. They're definitely a little bit different, but they play upon the different skills based on each of those different categories. Okay, so our debate this summer has one topic. So every student in every one of our camps from the first week until now, the 8th week, has debated this topic. And our summer topic is government regulation on social media companies. Do more good than harm. Government regulations on social media companies do more good than harm. It's been a very interesting topic. And what you're going to see today is students who then have taken that topic and they brainstormed ideas underneath that big umbrella topic into smaller ideas. So they're going to be arguing a component part of this overall theme or overall topic. And so you're going to see that today, and I'll announce like what each person is doing, etc. Our normal format, which is what the students have been working on all week and what they accomplished this morning, was to go through a full debate. And this is Capital Debate's summer format for debate. So the 101 class starts with a persuasive speech. But then the 201 class, if they wrote the speech on the debate topic, takes that persuasive speech and then expands it into a debate. So those students that had a 4-minute speech then had to change that into a debate formatted speech. There's a 4-minute opening speech, then a cross-examination, then a 4-minute opening speech by the con, and then a cross-examination, and then a refutation speech, which is basically the one speaker attacking the other speaker's arguments, and then another refutation speech where that speaker then attacks their opponent's arguments, and then 2 closing speeches where they summarize and recap what has happened in the debate. This kind of follows with typical debate format. I would say there's maybe one missing part that we might add in like a 301 or a 401 class. And you'll notice that the students have debated the same opponent each week. When they move to a 301 class, they debate all the different students. So they have to learn all the different arguments underneath our big umbrella topic. They also have 2 minutes of prep, but I don't think many people are going to be taking prep time today because they're pretty well organized and ready to go. But if they need prep time, they can take it. So our format today is going to be a shortened format for the showcase. 1, we wanted to showcase the students' skills. And 2, we didn't want the day to be really long because each full debate takes a good half hour to do. So what we've done is we've shortened the format so you still see all the component parts of the debate, but you don't have to be there for a full half an hour debate. So each pairing will do about a 15-minute debate. So we'll start again, opening speech, then cross-examination, opening speech, cross-examination, refutation, refutation, closing, closing. So we're still doing all the component parts. We've just cut it down to maybe 1 argument instead of 2 arguments in each of the categories. So it'll give you a little snippet of what the students have done without having to spend the entire afternoon watching debate. Without further ado, our first debate is going to be between Alvin Lee and Mackenzie Grove. Alvin is upholding, and you can come on screen if you want. Alvin is upholding the pro side, which is bias and misinformation. And Mackenzie's title is Don't Take Away Our Freedom. So we're going to start with Alvin. If you could come to screen, Alvin. Alvin's going to do his 2-minute version of his constructive or his opening. There's Alvin. So I'm going to disappear Alvin and let you take it away.
Did you know that some of the opinions you see on Twitter about the coronavirus pandemic may not be real? A study by Carnegie Mellon University showed that almost half of the users talking about the pandemic are bots. These bots may be able to sway users' opinions and even affect voting results, which is why I support the statement, government regulations of social media companies do more good than harm. Misinformation in social media platforms are becoming harder to detect. With the help of the government, companies can more efficiently remove these content. Because these platforms are becoming riddled with unsafe information. According to the Library of Congress in September 2019, the use of technology enables people intending to manipulate public opinion by spreading false or misleading information to reach targeted audiences. The use of technology in influencing campaigns becomes harder to spot when individuals or foreign adversaries facilitate the creation of internal tensions within the country. This means it is becoming harder for social media companies to stop the spread of misinformation from both inside America and from foreign countries. According to NPR News' article on May 27, 2020, a study out last week from researchers at Carnegie Mellon University found that nearly half of the Twitter accounts spreading messages about the coronavirus pandemic are likely bots. Bots controlled by foreign nations could affect the outcome of our elections and may mislead people to believe a certain way about a certain issue. According to Forbes' article on May 25, 2020, the amount of deepfake content online is growing at a rapid rate. At the beginning of 2019, there were 7,964 deepfake videos online. Just 9 months later, that figure had jumped to 14,678. Although sometimes funny, these fake photos/videos could be used to harm society's view on certain issues or people. Users on the internet may be manipulated to think a certain way about topics, and may even impact large events such as elections, wars, and protests. The government should be the ones regulating content on social media platforms. Social media should be a place of diverse opinions from real people. Vote pro for government regulation.
Thanks so much, Alvin, for that speech. We'll now have Mackenzie come to screen. Mackenzie will do 1 minute of cross-examination whenever you're ready. Your mic is off, Mackenzie.
Why would the government do better at regulating than social media?
The government has a higher number of personnel and more funds, so they will be better equipped to handle these situations, and they will more efficiently remove content.
Would the government regulate social media remove all misinformation?
The government would remove misinformation that is harmful to society, as in they might endanger a person's view on an issue, or the information is false or misleading.
Would it be worth losing some of our freedom of speech to prevent the spread of misinformation?
The citizen safety and um, the citizen safety and the citizen safety is at risk if we do not regulate social media, and so, government regulation of social media may even increase the amount of free speech granted to the users.
Okay, time for questioning has elapsed. Thanks so much, Mackenzie and Alvin. Mackenzie will now present a 2-minute version of her opening speech.
I do not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. These words, spoken by Evelyn Beatrice Hall, show the importance of free speech. This is why I disagree that government regulations on social media do more good than harm. Government regulations on social media could restrict free speech. This is because it gives the government too much power over social media. According to the Cato Institute in 2019, granting such power would gravely threaten free speech and the independence of the private sector. We have seen that these tech companies are grappling with many of the problems cited by those calling for public action. The companies are technically sophisticated and thus far more capable of dealing with these issues. Social media is a place where people share their views, beliefs, ideas, and what they want to change. According to The Hill, the reality is that in our politicized and polarized age, almost anything can be considered political, from the places we shop to the movies and music we consume. Every single policy regarding content would therefore come under government scrutiny, and what is permitted would vary based on the whims of unaccountable political appointees. If the government were to regulate social media, it is likely that the regulation would be biased, as anything could be considered political. This is also seen in the Middle East. According to the Pangea Journal, the Arab Spring revolutions are unlike any other because the ones that succeeded were able to generate a democracy after decades of corrupt government rule through an entirely grassroots social movement. The government tried to censor newspapers, but they used social media to spread their message. The government would have so much power that it would become near impossible for citizens to be able to protest its actions. Let the government regulate social media does more harm than good. I strongly urge you to vote con.
Thank you so much for that speech. Alvin, if you could join us, Alvin will do 1 minute of cross-examination.
If free speech is a right that can't be restricted, how would the government restrict free speech?
The government may be able to find loopholes around amendments as have been done in the past, so they can use that to limit free speech.
If social media companies already control what you see on these platforms using filter bubbles, is social media restrictions any better than the government's restrictions?
Yes, because while filter bubbles can be bad, they can also show you more of what you believe in. And if the government were to regulate, you would be everything would be restricted and you wouldn't even have a chance to see some things.
Time for one quick question.
Is misinformation an obstacle for social media's goal to uphold freedom of speech?
Can you repeat the question?
Is misinformation an obstacle for social media's goal to uphold the freedom of speech?
No, because it is possible for social media to educate citizens on the misinformation, so it wouldn't be as severe as if the government were to regulate it.
Great, thank you so much. Alvin's going to stay on screen. Alvin's going to do a refutation speech. Normally it's 3 minutes. This will be a 2-minute limit to his speech. Whenever you're ready, Alvin.
My opponent claims that government regulations on social media could restrict free speech. However, our governments are not able to restrict free speech because of the First Amendment. The government will only be able to delete posts that violate their standards. This won't allow the government to be as tyrannical as one may think. My opponent also states that governments will have too much power over social media. Although the government could become too powerful, social media platforms already control most of what you see on the platform. According to Farnham Street Blog, many companies use algorithms to create filter bubbles and distort the reality. Next, my opponent supports her claim with the idea that social media is a place where everyone can share their ideas. I agree. The social media should be a place where real people can share their ideas as long as they are not harmful. However, the government would be the only group that can uphold this statement. The government could oversee the platforms to make sure that they will not overflow with false information. My opponent's second point is that everything would become too political. However, as I said before, checks and balances limit the power of the government from becoming too powerful or too influential in our lives. My opponent's third point is that the government might try to censor newspapers and even social media. Again, due to checks and balances, there will be no instance of the government attempting to censor newspapers or becoming too powerful. My opponent says that the government would restrict citizens' voices. Due to the First Amendment, they would not control social media to the extent that no one can speak their thoughts freely. Finally, my opponent's conclusion states, letting the government regulate social media does more harm than good. However, the rights of all citizens of America can be limited for the common good. Misinformation and bias should not be tolerated in any case, and the government should have the right to set equal standards and regulate posts for the good of all users.
Very good. Thanks, Alvin. We now have a 2-minute refutation by Mackenzie.
My opponent's argument is that misinformation in social media platforms is becoming harder to detect, so the government will do this more effectively. However, letting the government assist in removing this content will take away from more important things such as funding, education, and healthcare. Even though my opponent's support for this argument claims that it is hard for social media companies to stop the spread of misinformation, it is possible for the social media companies themselves to put rules in place to prevent unsafe information. This is the same for bots, because if the social media companies can identify the bots, then they should be the ones to remove it, as they know their technology best. If the government does it, the government would be wasting their time. Lastly, my opponent's impact for this argument is that users can be manipulated to think a certain way. However, I have two responses. First, let the government regulate this would let them manipulate people on a much larger scale. Second, there are many people who post on social media platforms, so it is very easy to see other people's ideas, even unintentionally. As you can see, my opponent's point doesn't stand, and it is false that government regulation does more good than harm. Protect the right of freedom of speech and vote con.
Thanks so much, Mackenzie. We'll now have Alvin come back to the screen for a 1-minute closing.
Imagine a world where you are not aware of events that are happening in your own country. Imagine if bots manipulated people into believing false information. Imagine if fake videos created by AI forced you to change your perspective on issues. This is the world that you might live in if the government does not regulate social media. Already, we are feeling the effects of companies self-regulating. Studies show that almost half of the users talking about the coronavirus pandemic are likely bots. These bots could be used to change people's opinions on certain issues and may even affect elections. Deepfake videos are emerging around the internet and may cause us to change our perspectives on people. This technology misinforms us about many topics, even impacting wars, elections, and protests. Removing this content outweighs the slim chance that the government might become too powerful against the Constitution. Government regulation will make sure that social media is a place where you can get your information, and a place where you don't have to be manipulated or misguided. Let's make sure the world is not a place riddled by false information. Let's make sure our elections are really only ours. And finally, let's make sure that we can truly share our opinions. Vote pro for social media platforms that allow us to share our opinions.
Very good. Thanks, Alvin. We now have a final closing by Mackenzie. This is a 1-minute speech.
Government regulations on social media do more harm than good. Letting the government regulate social media will lead to less freedom of speech. As I said in my argument, social media is a place for the people's voices to be heard. People can share their thoughts, views, and opinions with both people who think the same as them and differently. There will always be a risk of misinformation spreading. However, by letting the government regulate social media, you would also lose some of your freedom of speech. It will never be possible to remove all misinformation, but by educating our citizens, we can limit the consequences of it. On the other hand, letting the government regulate social media will limit freedom of speech, and there will be little the citizens can do to stop it. Letting the government regulate social media does more harm than good because it limits free speech. Don't let the government take away your rights. I strongly urge you to vote con.
Great job, Alvin and Alvin and Mackenzie. That was awesome. Even in the shortened version, it was so persuasive and really well researched. Thank you so much. That went really well. I think Selma's going to present our next slide for us. And I'll see it pop up there. There it is. Our next debate is Seyoon Jung and Charlotte Liu. Seyoon is upholding the pro side. His title is Regulations Needed to Stop Objectionable Material. And Charlotte is upholding the con side. Can you handle the truth? We'll start first with Seyoon. So Seyoon, there you are. I'm going to disappear, but I'll keep my mic on if you need anything. Whenever you're ready, this is a 2-minute opening.
As comic book hero, Superman once said, "We need to strive for truth, justice, and the American way." While Superman's alter ego was a reporter, Clark Kent, Clark didn't know about the term fake news. Today, fake news is used way too often, and sadly, most of our information is fake. Social media regulations are limiting objectionable material. Regulations help take down content that is not wanted to see. According to avajournal.com, April 1st, 2019, Citron says, "The more speech we will see filtered and removed, that speech will likely include critiques of hate speech and dissented speech." That is my word. This shows that Citron thinks most speech taken down are full of hate and rebellious speech. According to theconversation.com, the academic world demonstrates the diversity of negative online. Research has focused on topics such as dangerous speech, cyberbullying, and trolling. These negative online behaviors offer potential outlets for online hate. It is no surprise that so-called line between hate speech and free speech is problematic. This explains that negative online behavior is happening everywhere, causing, as the article says, potential outlets for online hate and abuse that can be amplified through the internet. Social media has developed with these regulations. Now kids can be safe on apps without seeing anything they would not want to. Regulations from the government are more helpful than harmful. Government regulations help social media develop to become a safe place, and we need to keep it that way. We need the government to help us find truth, justice, and after all, it is the American way. Vote pro.
Thanks, Siyun, for that opening speech. We'll now move to Charlotte, who has a 2-minute opening speech as well.
I'm sorry, doesn't she ask me questions?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. You know this format better than I do. Yes, this is a 1-minute sorry. I was like, oh, we got to move on to the next speech. Okay, Charlotte, you're going to have 1 minute to cross-examine Siyun.
Okay, so why is it important for the government to regulate our social media, not just the tech companies themselves?
Because tech companies leave out these little details while the government can cover them up, so the tech companies can update their content.
Okay, and if websites like YouTube and Facebook have already limited 99% of the objectionable content, what's the point of the government to watch out for the 1%, knowing that it's possible for them to delete true content?
Well, an article says that the truth spreads slower than the actual false information, so the false information would get to people sooner.
Okay, and who's from your support, who's Citron? Why is he important to listen to instead? Like, is he a government official? He's the author of the.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Like, in your support, you had a author by Citron. Like, is he important somehow? Like, is he a government official or anything?
I am not sure what his role is, but I do know that he was in a very what is it? Like reliable article, so
Okay, that's all.
Great, time for questioning has elapsed. We now move on to a 2-minute opening speech by the con.
Do you think that the government can handle monitoring all social media companies' actions? The government is too busy and has too much to do, which is why I disagree that government regulations of social media companies do more good than harm. The government shouldn't regulate social media companies because they don't have the capability of doing it properly. According to the American Bar Association, only the tech companies themselves have the resources and the background to address the problem. Ex post detection and removal of objectionable content will require development of sophisticated tools and technology. This means that only the tech companies themselves know more than the government about what tech they need to use when they have to remove objectionable content. Stated by the FBI, right now there are around 35,000 FBI employees. According to the Observer Research Foundation, YouTube employs 10,000 people globally for monitoring and removal of objectionable content. Facebook employs over 30,000 people for detection and removal. In total, there are 40,000 people who monitor 2 websites only for objectionable content. This does not include determinations on fake news, misinformation, and other harmful content. Knowing that it takes 40,000 people to monitor only 2 websites, which is more than the entire FBI, how many people would it take to monitor everything that happens on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and the many more social media companies? This is bad because the government has to spend a lot of money on finding who knows how many people to monitor all of the social media platforms when they still have to spend money and worry about other big things like education, COVID, and more. This is why I disagree that government regulations of social media companies do more good than harm. For these reasons, I strongly urge a con ballot.
Very good. Thanks, Charlotte. We'll now have 1 minute of cross-examination by the pro. Whenever you're ready, Siyun.
Okay, my first question is, how does the government regulation harm freedom of speech? Doesn't it protect it?
Well, the government, it harms it because the government has been taking down comments by the public that is totally legal. They're not saying anything legal. It's just the government's taking it down because it's just something that they don't like, and that's violating the First Amendment, the freedom of speech.
Okay, my second question is, how will social media companies be able to protect citizens if they don't have laws?
The social media companies can still do look. They still have a lot of people like Facebook, right? They have 30,000 people that can still just look at comments and delete them if they want to.
Okay, my last question is, how can social media companies handle their employee or owner biases?
They can handle it because I mean the people are in charge of picking how many people, and it's not like the government would do any other better job. The government also has bias.
Okay, questioning time has elapsed. We now move to a 2-minute refutation speech by the pro.
My opponent's first argument is that My opponent's first argument is that the government shouldn't regulate social media companies because they don't have the capability to do it properly. However, the government does have these capabilities. According to BBC.com, the government is to outline new powers for the media regulator of COM to police social media. My opponent's first piece of evidence is that only the tech companies have the resources and the background to address the problem. But the government can set up regulation so that social media companies can pick up on the little details that can turn into a disaster. Making this a rule will pressure the app creators so they can update their technology to pick up or remove this content. My opponent's second piece of evidence is that thousands of videos and posts have been taken down that hold true evidence. However, according to NBCnews.com, falsehood diffused significantly faster, far deeper, and more broadly than the truth in all categories of information.
Oop, you clicked your camera off.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's okay. There you go.
That's my end of the refutation speech.
Okay. We'll now have a 2-minute refutation by the con. Charlie, can you tip your camera down just a hair? Much better. Thank you so much.
My opponent's first claim is that regulations help take down content that is not wanted to see. This reason is flawed for 2 reasons. First, what's the point of having the government do all of this when the social media platforms can just do it better? Second, the government can be biased. The government sometimes takes down content that is although true, it's just harmful to them. Next, my opponent says that most speech taken down are full of hate and rebellious speech. Yet the government is still taking down plenty of legal content just because it's hurtful to them. My opponent's second support is that negative online behavior is causing online hate and abuse. First of all, there is always going to be content on the internet that will be offensive to at least one person. And big platforms like Facebook and YouTube have already limited 99% of this harmful content. What's the point of the government trying to help with 1% while risking deleting factual information? Overall, when the social media platforms themselves have already limited pretty much all of their harmful content. If the government regulates social media, the government is probably going to delete more truth than harmful content, knowing that they are probably going to be biased. Therefore, I strongly urge a combat it.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. We now have a 1-minute closing by the pro.
We clearly should keep regulations in social media. First, I stated why we need these regulations and their impacts on social media. I finally urge you to vote pro for the better. Your childhood hero, Superman, would agree as well.
Thanks, Yoon. And Charlotte, a 1-minute closing.
Okay, first I showed you that government regulations on social media wouldn't work because they don't have the capability of doing it properly. Next, my opponent stated that government regulations on social media would limit objectionable material and help take down content that isn't wanted to see. But what do we want more? Do we want to try to delete every single piece of misinformation when there is still going to be plenty out there, and knowing that social media platforms can just handle it? Or do we want to be able to speak up, share our thoughts and feelings? If we allow the government to regulate social media platforms, it would give us safety. But if we don't allow the government to regulate social media, we will get safety from the tech companies themselves and the freedom of speech. Therefore, I strongly urge a calm ballot.
Well done, Charlotte and Siyun. That was very enjoyable. Thanks so much for both of your efforts there. Our next debate is Emily Zhang and Rose Whaley. Emily is upholding the pro side, and the title of her speech is Social Media Companies Are Biased, Pop the Bubble. The title of Rose's speech on the con is Government Regulating Social Media, Is It Actually Efficient? We'll start with a 2-minute opening speech by the pro, and that's Emily. And Emily, I'm going to turn my camera off so you have the floor.
Okay. How many of you have seen advice on social media about treatments for COVID-19? Now, how much of that advice has actually been legitimate? Well, according to the National Institute of Health, over 52 million people have engaged with false information about COVID-19. Only with government regulations will we be able to remove the misinformation that is endangering countless lives. Thus, I stand by the resolution. Government regulations on social media do more good than harm. First, government regulation would stop misinformation from spreading because the government would be able to take down and investigate misinformation on social media before it reaches the public. According to Syracuse Law Review, in September of 2018, a fraudulent news article written by 5 recent college graduates wrote, "Breaking: Tens of thousands of fraudulent Clinton votes found in Ohio warehouse." 6 million people, many of which actually took it seriously, shared the article using social media. The Franklin County, Ohio Board of Elections immediately announced that it was investigating the issue and later announced that the allegations were untrue. Furthermore, according to the National Institute of Health, one of the many examples of misinformation about treatments for COVID-19 is drinking a bleaching agent made of sodium chloride solution with citric acid to activate antiviral actions. The FDA has previously served severe warnings against this, as it causes severe vomiting, life-threatening low blood pressure, and acute liver failure. As you can see, potentially harmful treatments for COVID-19 on social media can mislead and endanger the lives of people. Additionally, misleading news headlines can sway voters' views and affect elections. So next time you see advice on social media for stopping the spread of the coronavirus or an article supporting a political standpoint, I urge you to triple check it and consider how it might be a baseless claim intended to mislead you. Therefore, I stand by the resolution. Government regulations on social media would do more good than harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We now invite Rose to the screen for a 1-minute cross-examination.
So first, the government can filter misinformation, True, but do they really have the technology and the staff to do it more efficiently than social media sites?
Yes, because the government has more personnel. They can team up with social media sites to stop the spread of misinformation and take down even more misleading headlines before they are spread.
Next, will we know when the government has done something wrong and unconstitutional, and how will we know?
Well, according to the First Amendment, people are allowed to post things that go against the government. So if the government removes them, we know that the government has done something wrong. However, the government cannot do this because of the First Amendment.
You say that some of these posts alter elections, so why should we really trust the government if they're just rigging the elections?
Well, these posts, the government the government cannot delete posts that like go against their beliefs, or candidates cannot. But these headlines, they mislead voters and they're completely untrue. So we should remove them.
Okay, time for questions has elapsed. We move
Thank
on to a 2-minute con opening speech.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the definition of efficient is effective, producing the desired result with the minimum wasted effort. When it comes to regulating social media, everyone wants it to be efficient, right? Well, the government regulating social media neither produces the desired result nor wastes any effort. That's why I negate that government regulations on social media do more good than harm. First, the government can restrict social media to manipulate the public for their own benefit because they have power and they often abuse it. According to the University of Oxford Internet Institute, those government cyber troops would use online commentators and fake social media accounts to post to spread pro-government or pro-party messages to populations both domestic and abroad. In other words, by having cyber troops, the government manipulates the information we see on social media. For example, if President Trump campaign can post fake social media accounts to post things to help him be reelected in November. According to the New York Times on January 10, 2019, in China, they arrested citizens for posts they put up on Twitter. If we give up Twitter, we are losing one of our last places to speak, said an activist who was told by the police to delete a post criticizing the Chinese government. To explain, by the government taking down posts they don't like, the party in power silences opposition voices and violates people's rights, such as the First Amendment in the US. Council on Foreign Relations reported that in China, more than a dozen government bodies review and enforce laws related to information flow within and to and from China. Many monitoring bodies work together to ensure content promotes party doctrine. To explain in this case, Chinese government has more control and power than its people and has the ability to stay in control using social media and doesn't give other people or parties a chance to take power. This is important because if the government is allowed to monitor social media platforms, the public only sees the side of the story that the people in power want them to see. The people on these sites don't know the full truth, and knowing the full truth is important in a democracy. If the government got involved, we would have had less success than the social media companies themselves. We need to let these companies do what they do best. I disagree that government regulations on social media companies do more good than harm because they manipulate the public and they alter elections, making the government not fair, and they don't have the ability to show you posts that you want to see. Now, that's the opposite of efficiency. And if you don't want to go onto Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram and see fake posts or have your voice be silenced for no reason, then I strongly urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Rose. We now have 1 minute of cross-examination questions.
Okay, so although there are employees on both sides of an issue working at one platform, will that stop them from deleting posts they disagree with?
I think that since there are so many personnel working at the social media platforms, it's impossible for one side of a story to take over. And also, if you can visit another platform and see different points of view,
Okay. In China, are cyber troops a good example for the rest of the world, especially countries with different systems of government?
Well, like I said, cyber troops are used sometimes to manipulate social media, so I don't think they're a good example.
Could the government employ their personnel to stop the spread of misinformation or other harmful posts?
They could, but they can also use it for their own benefits, and the social media companies do that a lot.
Okay, time for questions has elapsed. We will now move on to a 2-minute refutation speech given by the pro.
Okay, so my opponent's argument is that governments can restrict social media to manipulate the public for their own benefits. This is flawed for two reasons. First, we elect government officials, and we choose them to oversee our systems. That means that we should trust them to oversee platforms where we communicate. Second, the government has a checks and balances system. So if one branch is too powerful or abuses their power, it can be overridden. Plus, the First Amendment allows users to make posts against the government, making it difficult for the government to take down posts they disagree with without being overridden. On the other hand, social media platforms do not have a checks and balances system, and it might even be easier for them to abuse and restrict social media since they're right there controlling the algorithms on their own platform. For instance, according to the Farnham Street blog, they can easily create filter bubbles to manipulate users' feeds and ideas, leading them to forget that other perspectives exist, and insulate them from any sort of cognitive dissonance by limiting what they see. According to the Pew Research Center, 62% of adults in America get their news from social media. Therefore, it is crucial that we are informed on all sides of an issue, not isolated by bias online. Thus, government regulations would do more good than harm.
Thank you, Emily, for that 2-minute refutation. We'll now move on to the con speaker, Rose, for her 2-minute refutation.
In my opponent's first claim, she states that government regulation will stop misinformation from spreading because they can look at posts before they reach the public. However, this is flawed because giving government officials this right will allow them to choose which posts benefit them. If you had the power to choose what posts went up on social media, would you allow posts to be shared that said bad things about you? So the government will limit things considering their bias. This is worse than social media bias because the government can affect things like democracy and public opinion. The second argument states that government regulation can filter misinformation about COVID-19. However, social media companies use their technology to filter in this information as well. These sites can do it more efficiently because they have a team of staff for that purpose. Twitter has taken down posts and accounts related to QAnon, a conspiracy theory organization, and has posted threats for physical harm, fake information, and cures for COVID-19 that can end up harming people. As stated in the New York Times, Twitter has monitored accounts specific to their platform, making it safer than what the government could ever do. The New York Times says over several weeks, Twitter has removed 7,000 accounts that posted QAnon material, and an additional 150,000 accounts will be hidden from trends in search on Twitter. That's all taken care of by Twitter and not the government. In the end, social media platforms do a better job of managing themselves. One wrong move, and they're called out for it. All government regulations have bad sides, no question. So why should we let them take power when it would be really more effective to allow the social media companies to do it themselves? Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. We'll now have a 1-minute closing speech.
All right, hold on. According to the National Institute of Health, conspiracy theories about COVID-19's origins have amassed over 20 million engagements. Clearly, it is vital that the government take down misinformation and pop the filter bubbles that isolate us from other perspectives. My first argument was that government regulation would stop misinformation from spreading. I provided examples of misinformation on social media using evidence from the National Institute of Health. My opponent responded that government regulation would allow the government officials to release posts that favor them and delete posts that disagree with them. I disagree because a system of checks and balances would stop the government from removing posts they don't agree with. Additionally, the First Amendment allows people to make a post against the government. However, there is nothing stopping social media platforms from removing posts they disagree with because they have no such systems of checks and balances. This is crucial because in some cases, government regulation would actually protect the people's rights, allowing them to speak freely. Stopping the spread of misinformation could save thousands of lives out of the 52 million people who have engaged with false information about COVID-19. Furthermore, government regulation is necessary to stop social media platforms from restricting posts so they conform to their own beliefs. Therefore, I urge you to vote pro.
Thanks so much, Emily. We'll now have a 1-minute closing by the con speaker.
Sorry, I accidentally switched to phone call. Okay. I negate that government regulations on social media companies do more good than harm because it is not efficient. They can manipulate platforms by using cyber troops and by putting certain filters on posts they don't agree with. By doing that and by having enough power to silence and arrest people with opposition voices, they violate the First Amendment. They can also use social media as a way to be reelected, meaning that our government is only partly determined by elections and we have no reason to trust them. These companies usually have the ability to manage all of the content, and when they don't, they are immediately called out for it by newspapers and their users and advertisers, acting as a substitute for the checks and balances system. Besides, everyone will know right away, and the situation can be fixed within a couple weeks. While when the government does something wrong, it can take up to a couple of years to go through court. That is way less practical than if the platform's messed up. Take Facebook for an example. When they refused to take down provocative posts from Donald Trump, there was an advertisers boycott that is still going on about civil rights. And also, users don't always go on these platforms to read the news. Many leave that up to reliable newspapers and reliable websites. Lots of people use social media just to connect with their friends and followers. We should know better than to trust the things we see on social media. By regulating social media companies, the government does more harm to society because they silence voices they don't want to hear and eliminate free speech, while at the same time, their system is way less effective. That's why these statements demonstrate why I strongly urge you to vote con, and by doing so, create a place where we can share our voices and ideas. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rose and Emily. Well done. Our final debate is coming up on the screen between Ryan Tay and Aryan Shah. Ryan's title, Upholding the Pro Side, Government Ensures Safety, and Aryan's title, Government Regulation, Monopolies and Shackled Expression. I think it is expression. It's buried underneath my thing. Yeah, expression. We'll call Ryan to the screen and he will give a 2-minute opening. There's Ryan. I'm going to disappear, Ryan.
1/3 of people think it is unreliable. 1/3 of people on social media think that it is unreliable. The government can change that by getting rid of all these unreliable sources on social media. If you let the government regulate social media, this will all change. I affirm that government regulations on social media companies do more good than harm. If the government oversees social media platforms, we will be safer. The government can stop misinformation and scams on the internet, and Applebaum, the Washington from the Washington Post in 2019 said that we can curb the anonymity of the internet. Recent research showed the number of fake accounts on Facebook may be far higher than what the company has stated in public, because we have a right to know if we are interacting with real people or bots. Bots are accounts that don't have a real user. Bots are bad because they can steal data or hack into accounts. If the government regulates social media, there will be less bots. To add to this, Peter Sushu from Forbes wrote an article in April 17, 2020, saying, according to a new report published earlier this week by the Reuters Institute for Study of Journalism at the University of Oxford, found that roughly 1/3 of social media users across the US, as well as Argentina, Germany, South Korea, and the UK, reported seeing false or misleading info about coronavirus. This is important because when people believe fake or exaggerated news, they spread the news and to friends and family. Misinformation can be bad because people become more scared. An example was that there was a rumor about that putting bleach on food was bad for coronavirus, and people actually believed that. With this false information, how do you know what is real or fake? Now you know that the government should monitor social media platforms. Less people will think that social media is unreliable. I strongly urge you to vote pro.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for that speech. We now invite Aryan to the screen to do 1 minute of cross-examination.
Okay, is the government still reliable to take down misinformation even after they have proven to give it out? For example, Trump's tweet about putting bleach on food to prevent the coronavirus?
Yes, only the president is giving the info.
Okay. With the steady rise of responsibilities the government needs to manage, such as the coronavirus and others, do you still believe the government would have the time to manage this problem?
No, but after coronavirus, they could.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we now move on to a 2-minute opening speech by the Khan. Aryan, whenever you're ready.
How would you feel if you were not able to support your startup business? Government regulations favor large businesses over small ones. This is why I negate that government regulations of social media companies do more good than harm. Government regulations cause monopolies over social media because they have protected social media companies from litigation. According to the Cato Institute on April 9, 2019, Congress has offered additional protections to tech companies by freeing them from the most intermediary liability for speech that appears on their platforms. By not holding tech companies reliable for what their consumers post, their monopolies increase. Also by the Cato Institute, although some platforms are large and dominant, their market power can disintegrate and alternatives are available for speakers excluded from a platform. The history of broadcast media regulation shows that government regulation tends to support rather than mitigate monopolies. Unlike, unlike large social media companies, startup companies are held liable for everything their users post. Another article by Liveman, August 3rd in 2019, Facebook and Twitter's are monopolies and have silenced voices have hardly have any other outlet currently. Government regulations silence small startup companies. Small companies don't have a chance to support their business as the government provides a free pass for larger ones against court and it's easier for them to file against startups. Government regulations do more harm than good. Startups should have a chance to attack larger ones. For these reasons, I urge a con ballot.
Okay, thanks so much, Aryan. We'll now stay on screen because we have to do cross-examination. So we'll now have 1 minute of cross-examination by Ryan.
What does protecting social media companies from litigation have to do with your first claim?
It is supposed to let small companies have a chance at attacking larger ones, but they can't as the government lets them slip out of court situations.
Are startups really that important?
Yes, they are. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any major social media platforms today.
Do you favor large businesses over small businesses?
Personally, no, I do not.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, we now move on to a 2-minute refutation speech by the pro.
If the government regulates social media, they can find the bad people that misuse the First Amendment. If somebody is cyberbullying another kid, they are misusing the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. If nobody stops that kid, it could go worse. If the government has to step in, the kids being bullied are already hurt, when the government could have stopped the bully before some of the kids are hurt. You said that government regulations let large companies slip out of court situations. This argument is flawed because large tech companies are good and we depend on these. If there is a small tech company that not many people use, is it worth keeping? All these small companies are just a waste of space and money. We should also limit the amount of monopolies there are because they are illegal. In a way, they are helping us by getting rid of these small companies that could end up being a big monopoly. All social media platforms are all the same, so why have small businesses when we have big businesses? Startup companies are unimportant because they have a chance of becoming illegal monopolies.
Okay, thanks Ryan. We now have a 2-minute refutation by the con.
First, my opponent's argument talks about a quote on bots. That quote doesn't say that the government would do anything differently. Social media companies can manage bots on their own. Plus, it's faster and easier to do. Second, my opponent's last report from Reuters talks about various countries and misleading info. However, I have two responses. First, people should know not to accept everything they see on the internet. They should look into it more than just believing something. Second, social media companies pay for CDC ads because they want to drown out misleading ones. They are already taking the effort to manage misleading info, thus not needing government regulations. Finally, the last impact in my opponent's argument talked about misinformation and how the government can stop it, and gave the example of consuming bleach. The president himself tweeted that you should consume bleach to prevent the coronavirus. The government has proven to give misleading information on social media, so clearly they can't prevent it.
Okay, thank you so much for that refutation. We now have a 1-minute closing by the pro speaker.
If the government regulates social media well, all these problems that already mentioned will not become a problem. The governments would learn from the mistakes of Russia and China, so it would be different. First, I made a startling fact, saying that 1/3 of people think that social media is unreliable. The government could change that. I felt like that was a very strong point. The government could stop violence because the government could regulate the activity and everything would be better. If the government oversees social media, it will be safer because they could stop bots and stop the spread of misinformation. We do deserve to know if we're talking about bots. Misinformation is becoming a real problem to many people. I know that Ariane defeats the section, but the president would not be the one monitoring social media platforms. Besides, it is pretty likely that our current president, President Trump, who spread this rumor, will not be in office next year. That is why I strongly urge you to vote pro.
Hey, thanks so much, Ryan. We now have a 1-minute closing by our con speaker.
First, my opponent talks about the spread of misinformation and bots. Then he talks about how we should get rid of small companies, and if we don't use them, it would be better not to waste money on them. And then I talk about monopolies. If we remove small companies like startups, then we would never have anything new to use. No new ideas or platforms would be introduced to us. Bots can be easily managed by social media companies themselves, and we do not need the government to step in. Government regulations may never allow new ideas or platforms to be executed. For this reason, I strongly urge a con ballot.
Great, thanks so much, Ariane. And Ryan, great job. If we could get everyone back on screen, please. Thank you all for a great class. Oh, there. Oh, we're almost there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Missing some people. Selma and I wanted to thank you for such a great week, such a great class. Your debate showcase was awesome today. Your debates this morning were amazing. So thank you so much. Selma, do you want to say anything else before we say goodbye?
You guys were awesome. I hope you guys had as much fun as we did, and we look forward to hearing about whatever you guys are doing later on. So keep in touch and have a great rest of your summer.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.